I want you to place yourself in a very specific, just totally unforgiving environment.
Hmm.
It is late October in the year 1905. You are standing on the slanting, ice-slicked wooden deck of a ship.
And you're completely exposed.
Exactly. You are out in the middle of Lake Huron. But, I mean, lake is an entirely inadequate word for what is happening around you.
But it's not a lake at that point.
No, it behaves like a violent, chaotic ocean. It is pitch black. A blinding, freezing snowstorm is tearing across the water, and it's reducing visibility to absolute zero.
You literally can't see your own hand in front of your face.
Right, and the wind isn't just blowing, it is a physical force. It's screaming through the rigging, completely deafening you.
Yeah.
Beneath your boots, 250 feet of wooden decking is just groaning under immense stress. You can actually hear the timber physically beginning to fracture.
Oh, man, that sound alone.
Right, and the temperature is plunging below freezing. The water washing over the rails is turning the entire deck into this, frictionless sheet of ice.
And in that environment, the sensory deprivation combined with the physical assault, it makes it nearly impossible to even process information.
You're just in pure survival mode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You cannot see the horizon to orient yourself. You can't hear the person standing next to you. The cold rapidly degrades your motor skills.
Wow.
I mean, the human body is entirely outmatched by the thermodynamics and just the raw kinetic energy of a storm like that.
That is the baseline reality for the night of October 20th, 1905. And the situation is, it's actually far worse than just being caught in a storm.
Right, because of the specific setup.
Exactly. You are not an independent vessel out there. You are part of a 3-ship convoy. A powerful steamship is plowing through the storm at the front of the line. Behind it, tethered by a thick, incredibly heavy towing cable, is your ship. A massive 250-foot wooden behemoth carrying 9 people.
And then there's the third one.
Yeah. Tethered behind your ship is a third vessel, just dragging at the rear. You are a captive middle link in this blind plunge through an inland sea.
Completely helpless.
And then, without any warning, the 250-foot vessel in the middle simply vanishes.
It just ceases to exist on the surface of the water. Which, I mean, from an engineering and physical standpoint, is staggering.
How does that even happen?
What we're talking about a structure displacing thousands of tons. For it to disappear so abruptly implies a catastrophic, almost instantaneous loss of buoyancy.
When the sun finally rises, there is no debris field. There are no lifeboats bobbing in the water.
Nothing.
There are no survivors. The only physical evidence that this massive vessel ever existed is pulled from the freezing depths by the crew of the lead steamship.
Yeah, this is the part that is just so chilling.
Right. They winch in their heavy tow cable, and they're expecting to find a sunken ship attached to it. Instead, they pull up a massive, violently splintered chunk of wood.
The towing post.
Yes, ripped completely out of the sunken ship's deck. And when they bring a lantern close to examine that wood, they find deep, frantic gouges.
Someone took an axe to it.
Someone took an axe to their own tow line in the dark.
It's a physical record of the final seconds of 9 lives. The marks of a heavy blade swung in pure desperation.
Cutting the only tether to the surface world.
Yeah.
So our mission on this deep dive is to forensically reconstruct this real-life maritime nightmare.
And it is a nightmare.
A total nightmare. We are going to examine the specific chain of historical decisions, the economic pressures, and the brutal environmental physics that doomed the Minnedosa.
The legendary Great Lakes schooner that was swallowed whole.
Exactly. We are going to strip away the folklore and look at the actual mechanics of how a massive ship dies, the desperate human calculus of those final moments, and the forensic evidence left behind at the bottom of the lake.
Because the story of the Minnedosa is not just about a bad storm. It's a locked room mystery.
Right.
But the room itself is a 250-foot wooden structure, and the locking mechanism is 210 feet of crushing, freezing water.
Wow. Yeah.
To understand how those axe marks got there, we really have to understand the hubris of the ship's construction and the fatal economics that placed it in that specific storm.
Okay, so let's start with the physical reality of the ship itself. Before we can analyze how it disappeared, we need to understand what it was.
Right.
The Minnedosa was constructed in 1890 in Kingston, Ontario.
Okay.
It was built by the Montreal Transportation Company. But our sources point out a pretty big contradiction here.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this is 1890, the world is rapidly moving towards steel and steam power. Yet the Montreal Transportation Company is commissioning a fleet of 41 wooden ships for Great Lakes service.
Yeah.
Why double down on an obsolete technology? Like, why would...
Well, it really comes down to capital expenditure versus operational cost. I mean,
Yeah.
steamships required a massive upfront investment.
Right, because of the engines and all that.
Exactly. You had to build the engines, source the coal, hire specialized engineers to maintain the boilers. Wood, on the other hand, was cheap and plentiful in Canada.
Makes sense.
And the shipwrights in Kingston possessed generations of expertise in working with it. So the Montreal Transportation Company calculated that they could build a massive fleet of wooden sailing vessels for a fraction of the cost.
And just harness the wind.
Right. Harnessing wind, which is free, to move bulk cargo like grain and coal.
Mm-hmm.
The Minnedosa was the absolute pinnacle of this corporate strategy.
The crown jewel.
She was the crown jewel of those 41 ships.
The sources describe her as the largest Canadian-built sailing vessel on the Great Lakes at the time. So let's look at the actual specifications.
Okay.
She was 250 feet long. She had a 36-foot bow, which means she was 36 feet wide, and she had a 15-foot depth in her hold. But then the records list two numbers that often confuse people.
The tonnage.
Yeah, a gross tonnage of 1,315 and a net tonnage of 1,041. What do these numbers actually tell us about the physical space inside this ship?
That is a crucial distinction, especially when we talk later about what she was actually carrying when she sank.
Right.
In maritime architecture, tonnage, in this context, doesn't refer to weight.
Oh, really?
No, it refers to volume. It stems from an old system of measuring how many tons, TUNS, which were these massive casks of wine a ship could carry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So one registered ton equals exactly 100 cubic feet of enclosed space.
So gross tonnage is the total internal volume of the ship.
Correct. So gross tonnage of 1,315 means the ship had 131,500 cubic feet of internal space.
That is massive.
It is. And the net tonnage, which was 1,041, that represents the actual cargo carrying capacity after you subtract the space needed for, the crew quarters, the navigation equipment, the sail.
So it's the usable space.
Exactly. This tells us the Minnedosa was essentially a cavernous floating warehouse.
But I want to push back on the engineering of a 250-foot wooden structure. Building something that long out of timber seems inherently problematic.
It is, right.
Right? If you have a steel hull, it's rigid, it can take the stress. But a 250-foot keel made of overlapping wooden beams pinned together, I mean, how does that not just snap in half the moment it encounters rough water?
Well, it does snap if the shipwrights aren't masters of their craft.
Oh.
You've hit on the exact physical limitation of wooden shipbuilding.
Okay.
As you build longer, the structural integrity decreases exponentially.
Because it's flexing.
Exactly. When a ship rides over a wave, the bow and stern are suspended over the troughs, right?
Right.
While the center is pushed up by the crest.
Oh, I see.
This is called hogging. Then, as the wave passes, the bow and stern are pushed up by two crests, and the heavy center sags into the trough. It's called sagging.
So the entire 250-foot length is constantly flexing. It's bending up and down like a ruler over the edge of a desk.
Precisely. And in a wooden ship, that flexing causes the wooden planks to rub against each other.
Right.
And the oakum, the tarred hemp rope they pack between the planks to waterproof the hull, it begins to work loose.
Oh, no. So it just starts leaking.
Yeah. The ship constantly takes on water just from the friction of moving through waves. This is why wooden ships always had to have their bilge pumps running.
That sounds incredibly precarious.
It was. Now, factor in the specific environment of the Great Lakes. Ocean waves are they're long swells. The energy is spread out over a vast distance, so a ship rides up and over them relatively smoothly.
Okay.
The Great Lakes, however, are relatively shallow basins. When severe wind systems hit them, they generate steep, closely packed waves with a very short frequency.
Meaning the ship doesn't ride up and over smoothly.
No.
It's getting hit by a second wave before it has recovered from the first.
Exactly. The hull is subjected to these punishing, rapid-fire impacts that amplify that hogging and sagging effect we talked about.
Wow.
The Minnedosa was built with massive white oak ribs and reinforced internal bracing to counter this, but she was operating right at the absolute limit of what wood could handle in that specific hydrological environment.
Right.
Plus, she was a four-masted schooner. The masts alone weighed tons, and the square footage of canvas she could put in the air would generate immense torque on the hull when the wind caught it.
So she is an engineering marvel, but inherently fragile by design.
Inherently.
And the tragic irony here is that despite being this beautiful, record-breaking sailing vessel, her independence was stripped away almost immediately.
Yeah.
The era of the majestic sailing ship was dying, and the Minnedosa was demoted to what our sources call a consort barge. I want to delve into this because the psychology and the mechanics of the system are deeply unsettling.
They really are. The consort barge system is one of the most ruthless efficiency adaptations in maritime history.
How so?
Well, the transition to steam was expensive. Steamers could move independently of the wind, but the engines took up valuable cargo space.
Right.
Wooden sailing ships had vast cargo holds, but were at the mercy of the weather. So shipping companies combined them. They would use one powerful steamship to drag a line of deeply loaded, unpowered wooden ships behind it.
Like a train. They turned the largest sailing vessel in Canada into a glorified trailer.
It did. And the economic logic was brutal. You didn't need to pay a full crew of skilled sailors to man a barge. You just needed a skeleton crew.
Just to steer.
Yeah, a captain, a wheelsman, and a few deckhands to manage the tow lines and the bilge pumps. The steamship bore the fuel cost, and you tripled the amount of cargo you could move in a single trip.
Wow. And the sources show she was constantly towed. She spent her working life being dragged across the lakes by steamers like the Algonquin, the Glengarry, and interestingly, the SS Bannockburn.
Oh, the Bannockburn.
Yeah, the Bannockburn is a famous Great Lakes ghost ship that completely vanished with all hands in November 1902 in Lake Superior.
It really underscores the inherent danger of the lakes during this era. I mean, even the powerful steamships dragging these barges were highly vulnerable.
But I want to focus on what it feels like to be on the barge. Let's really analyze the psychological aspect of being a consort.
Yeah, put yourself there.
If you are on the Minnedosa, you have a 250-foot ship, but you have no control over your own destiny. You are attached by hundreds of feet of heavy cable to a ship ahead of you. If the steamer captain makes a mistake or decides to power through a storm rather than seek shelter, you are dragged into that storm whether you want to go or not.
The helplessness is profound. You cannot alter course independently. You cannot stop.
You're just along for the ride.
Your momentum is entirely dictated by the vessel ahead. If the steamer hits a dense fog bank and slows down abruptly, the heavy barge, which has immense forward momentum and no brakes, it risks running right up the tow line and colliding with the stern of the towing vessel.
That is terrifying.
It happened a lot.
And the ultimate indignity, the final removal of any agency she had, occurred in 1903.
The masts.
Yes. The owners decided that even maintaining her rigging was too much of an expense, so they cut her 4 magnificent masts down. They just amputated them.
It was a purely financial calculation. If she was always going to be towed, there was no need to pay for canvas, rigging, or the crew required to maintain it.
Right.
They stripped her down to a hollow wooden tub.
But wait, mechanically speaking, if you remove the masts, aren't you making the ship more stable?
How do you mean?
Well, you are removing all that top-heavy weight. She shouldn't roll as much in a storm, right?
In theory, yes, you lower the center of gravity.
Yeah.
But you also strip away her only emergency backup.
Oh, because she has no sails.
Exactly. If a tow line snapped in a gale before 1903, the crew could scramble up, drop the sails, and attempt to steer the Minnedosa to safety, or at least keep her bow pointed into the waves.
Keep her head into the wind.
Right. Once you cut those masts down, if that cable severs, you are entirely dead in the water. You are a 250-foot piece of driftwood.
Oh, wow.
You will immediately turn parallel to the waves, meaning you will fall into the trough, and the waves will simply begin to roll over the deck and batter the hull until it shatters.
So they traded her only survival mechanism for a slight reduction in maintenance costs.
Exactly.
And we know she wasn't invincible even before the masts came down. The records show she had already suffered structural traumas.
Yeah, she had a history.
In 1892, while navigating the Welland Canal, a packet freighter named the Arabian struck a lock, causing a collision that damaged the Minnedosa.
Right.
And later that same year, her mate was severely injured by violent waves crashing over the deck.
Those early incidents are they're crucial forensic precursors. The collision in the canal tells us her hull had already absorbed severe kinetic impact.
And wood doesn't just bounce back like nothing happened.
No, wood has memory. When timber is crushed or stressed, the internal fibers weaken. Even if repaired, that section of the hull will never possess its original flexibility.
It's always going to be a weak point.
Always. And the mate being injured by waves sweeping the deck proves her freeboard. The distance from the waterline to the deck was low enough that the lakes could easily reach onto the ship and claim someone.
So we have an aging wooden ship. Her hull has suffered previous stress. Her masts are gone. She is entirely dependent on a tow cable.
Yeah, she's operating that terrible wave frequency.
Exactly. She operates in a lake system known for wave frequencies that specifically tear long wooden ships apart. The trap is built. Now, we look at the bait. the cargo she took on in the fall of 1905.
This is where the physics of the disaster truly begin to align.
Yeah.
So it's October 18, 1905. The Minnedosa is at Fort William, Ontario, on the shores of Lake Superior. This is late in the shipping season.
The gales of November are coming.
Right. Companies were desperate to move as much grain as possible before the ice froze the lake solid.
The sources indicate she was loaded with 75,000 bushels of wheat. Let's do the math on that because the sheer scale of the weight is difficult to comprehend.
A standard bushel of wheat weighs roughly 60 pounds. Multiply that by 75,000, and you have 4.5 million pounds of grain.
Oh my God.
That is 2,250 tons of dead weight poured directly into that massive internal hold we discussed earlier.
4.5 million pounds. So she is sitting incredibly low in the water. Her deck is close to the surface. But my main concern here isn't just the weight, it's the material.
The wheat.
Yeah, because wheat isn't like coal or iron ore. I want to break down the specific physical threat of carrying grain in a wooden ship during a storm. If a seam pops on the hull and water gets in, what exactly happens?
It creates a catastrophic self-amplifying cycle of destruction.
How?
Grain is highly hygroscopic. It actively pulls moisture from its environment.
Oh.
If cold lake water breaches a wooden hull and reaches the cargo hold, the wheat at the bottom absorbs that water instantly. And when wheat absorbs water, it swells, expanding its volume significantly.
So you essentially have 4.5 million pounds of dry sponges suddenly expanding outward against the wooden walls of the ship.
Exactly. It creates immense, localized hydrostatic pressure against the oak ribs and pine planking from the inside.
Oh.
The expanding grain physically pushes the hull planks outward, tearing them away from the structural framing.
And then what?
Well, this widens the breach, so more water rushes in. The next layer of grain absorbs the water, swells, and pushes the wood even further apart. The ship literally begins to burst at the seams.
That is horrifying. And as it takes on water, it gets heavier, sinking deeper, exposing more of the weakened hull to the crushing pressure of the waves outside.
And there is a secondary, equally terrifying dynamic here.
What's that?
If a wave hits the ship from the side and causes her to roll deeply, the shifting mass of dry grain can slide to one side of the hold. But if it's wet, heavy grain, it doesn't slide back when the ship tries to right itself.
Oh, because it's clumped together.
Right. It clumps and stays on one side. This causes a permanent list. The ship is locked in a tilted position, meaning the next wave doesn't hit the armored side of the hull. It washes directly over the low deck, pouring down the hatches and accelerating the sinking process.
A ticking time bomb of swelling pressure.
And the men responsible for navigating this 4.5 million pound bomb are setting out into a notoriously dangerous time of year. Let's establish the chain of command and the formation.
Okay.
We have a three-ship convoy. At the front is the powerful steamer Westmount, commanded by Captain Alexander Milligan.
The Westmount has a thick towing cable running off its stern, attached to the bow of the Minnedosa in the middle, commanded by Captain John Phillips.
Right.
And the Minnedosa has a second cable running off its stern, dragging a smaller barge called the Melrose at the rear.
This string of pearls configuration, it was common but highly dangerous. The Minnedosa is anchoring the center, absorbing the tension from both the steamer pulling forward and the drag of the Melrose pulling backward.
Like being stretched on a rack.
Literally.
So the sources track their route. They depart Fort William and cross Lake Superior without major incident. Early on October 19, they successfully navigate the locks at Sault Ste. Marie. By the evening, they pass Detour, Michigan, transitioning from the St. Mary's River into the open, deep waters of Lake Huron. And this is where the environment turns on them.
Let's contextualize maritime weather forecasting in 1905. It was practically non-existent compared to today.
Right. No satellite.
No radio communication to receive shore-based weather updates either. There was no radar. A captain's primary tools were a glass barometer on the bulkhead and his own eyes.
And instinct.
Yeah. When Captain Milligan on the Westmount entered Lake Huron, he would have seen the atmospheric pressure on his barometer begin to plummet into a deep dive.
A massive low-pressure system was moving in. The wind shifted to the northeast and began to howl. And then the temperature drops and the snow begins.
Whiteout conditions.
We have to visualize this. It is the middle of the night.
Yeah.
The heavy snow reduces visibility to absolute zero. You are Captain Phillips on the Minnedosa. You cannot see the steamer pulling you.
You're completely blind.
You cannot see the barge behind you. You are hurtling blindly through churning black water. Your only proof that you are still connected to the steamer is the physical shudder of the tow line running off your bow.
That physical sensation is crucial to understanding the terror. Because a towing cable is not completely rigid, it has to have some slack to absorb the shock of the waves. But in a massive storm, the Westmount will drop into a wave trough, the line will go slack, and then the Westmount will hit the next crest and surge forward.
Oh, man.
That slack vanishes instantly, and the cable snaps taut with thousands of pounds of kinetic force. The massive wooden towing post on the bow of the Minnedosa absorbs that violent shock.
So the whole ship just violently jerks.
The entire ship shudders, groans, and is violently yanked forward over and over again in the pitch black.
The structural stress of that snapping action is immense. And as they cross Saginaw Bay on October 20th, this gale evolves into an absolute monster.
This is a highly documented meteorological event. The storm of October 20, 1905 is often referred to in maritime history as part of the broader deadly weather patterns of that era, like the Mataafa storm later that year.
It is a historic storm.
It was a historic extratropical cyclone. It generated hurricane-force wind gusts and towering waves. This single storm wrecked at least 11 ships across the Great Lakes and heavily damaged a dozen others.
Just carnage everywhere.
Yeah, it was an environment that was actively dismantling engineered structures across hundreds of square miles.
And Captain Milligan on the Westmount is right in the center of it, fighting for the survival of his own steamship. He is pushing toward the relative safety of Harbor Beach, Michigan.
He has to.
And he has no way of checking on the two ships trailing behind him. He just has to trust the lines.
He is flying completely blind. He has to maintain forward momentum. If he slows down to check the lines, he loses steerage, and the waves will push the Westmount sideways into the troughs.
So they roll over.
Exactly. He has to keep the engines throttled up, pulling the massive drag of the two barges through the storm.
And late on the evening of October 20, the catastrophic failure occurs. The Minnedosa disappears.
Yeah.
The way this is discovered is a masterclass in slow burn terror. Let's look at it from the perspective of the Melrose, the third ship at the very back of the line.
Okay, right.
The crew of the Melrose is fighting the storm, being dragged along. Suddenly, the intense, violent pulling on their bow stops. The tow line goes slack.
The Melrose instantly loses its forward momentum and is at the complete mercy of the waves. The crew realizes they have lost connection.
They must have been terrified.
Absolutely terrified. They rush to the bow. The freezing water is crashing over them as they begin to haul in the heavy tow line, expecting to eventually feel the resistance of the Minnedosa's stern.
Right, they think the line just went slack because they're in a trough or something.
Or maybe they're hoping the Minnedosa's just stopped ahead of them.
So they're pulling this freezing-soaked rope hand over hand. But the end of the rope comes out of the water relatively easily. And they find a detail that immediately shifts this from a structural failure to a human horror story. The cable hasn't snapped. The fibers haven't been torn apart by the tension of the storm. It has been cleanly cut.
That is an incredibly specific forensic detail. A snapped line looks like an explosion of hemp fibers. A cut line is uniform. Someone deliberately severed the connection between the Minnedosa and the Melrose.
We will analyze exactly why in a moment. But let's look at the front of the convoy. Captain Milligan on the Westmount eventually realizes the drag on his steamship has fundamentally changed.
The engines suddenly sound different.
Right. The engines are suddenly working less hard. He turns his massive steamship around in the middle of a hurricane, which is an incredibly dangerous maneuver, and begins to search the black water for his two massive barges.
He sweeps the area, but the visibility is zero. They see nothing. No lights, no wreckage.
Just the roar of the wind.
Finally, the crew of the Westmount moves to their stern and begins to winch in their own towing cable, the one attached to the bow of the Minnedosa.
This is the moment that defines the horror of this deep dive. The sailors on the steamship are operating the winch. They expect to find the 250-foot Minnedosa at the end of the line, perhaps foundering, perhaps capsized, but physically there.
That's what you would assume.
They pull, and finally, the heavy payload breaks the surface of the black water. And it is not a ship. It is a massive chunk of splintered wood.
It was the Minnedosa's towing post. The sheer force of the sinking ship, plunging into the abyss, was greater than the strength of the massive iron bolts anchoring the post to the deck.
That is hard to fathom.
It's incredible. The post ripped completely out of the deck framing of the schooner and remained attached to the Westmount's cable.
They haul this heavy, soaked piece of timber onto the deck of the steamship. They bring a lantern over in the howling wind to inspect it. And what do they find carved into the wood?
Deep, frantic axe marks.
Not a clean cut like the rope at the stern. Brutal, chaotic gouges in the massive wooden post itself.
Yes. The wood was hacked at repeatedly with a heavy blade.
Let's stop right here. We need to forensically reconstruct the final minutes of the Minnedosa based purely on the physical evidence of that cut rope at the stern and the axe-gouged post at the bow.
Okay.
This is the locked room mystery. What happened in the pitch black on that slanting deck?
If we synthesize the physics of the cargo, the age of the ship, and the severity of the storm, the sequence of events becomes terrifyingly clear.
Walk us through it.
The Minnedosa begins to take on massive amounts of water. The waves are washing over the deck, and the flexing of the hull has opened her seams. The 4.5 million pounds of wheat at the bottom of the hold begins to aggressively absorb the freezing water.
The grain swells. The hydrostatic pressure inside the hull begins to push the oak ribs outward. You would be able to hear the wood popping and screaming over the roar of the storm.
The structural integrity fails rapidly. The heavy, wet grain shifts to one side, causing the Minnedosa to list violently.
Like we talked about.
Exactly. Her deck is now angled toward the water. The next massive wave rolls over the low side and simply pushes the ship down. She loses buoyancy. She is no longer riding the waves, she is sinking into them.
Captain Phillips and his crew of 8 realize in the dark that the ship is foundering. They cannot pump the water out fast enough, the ship is going down.
They know it's over.
But here's the terrible human calculus. They are attached to 2 other ships.
A sinking 250-foot wooden ship carrying thousands of tons of saturated grain has immense negative buoyancy. If she sinks while fully tethered, her sheer weight will act like a massive anchor dropping to the bottom of the lake.
She's going to pull him down with her.
She will pull the Westmount backward, potentially ripping the stern off the steamship or dragging it under. And more immediately, she will drag the smaller Melrose behind her straight down to the ocean floor.
The crew of the Minnedosa knows they are dead. The water is freezing, the storm is raging. There are no lifeboats that could survive those waves.
None.
They have maybe 2 or 3 minutes before the ship slides beneath the surface. And in that ultimate moment of panic, or perhaps profound sacrifice, the crew scatters in the dark to sever the tethers.
Someone staggers to the stern, fighting the steep angle of the sinking deck, and takes an axe to the tow line, connecting them to the Melrose.
And that's why it was a clean cut.
Right. The line is taut, so a few solid strikes sever the tension, cleanly cutting the rope and setting the Melrose free. This single act saves the crew of the trailing barge.
But at the bow, the situation is different. The cable connecting them to the powerful Westmount is massive.
It might have been thick manila hawser, or even a wire rope composite. Someone runs to the bow with a heavy fire axe. The deck is slanting downward. The black water is literally rising up to their knees.
And they start blindly swinging the axe at the cable wrapped around the towing post. They are slipping on the ice. The wind is throwing them off balance. They miss the cable.
The axe bites deeply into the wooden post. They swing again, gouging the wood in a frantic blur of adrenaline.
But hold on, if the tension is that extreme, why didn't the axe sever the front line like it did the rear line?
It's likely a combination of the material of the tow line. If it had wire interwoven for strength, the axe would just bounce off or stick in the chaotic movement of the sinking ship.
Right, because the bow is dropping.
The person swinging the axe was likely thrown off their feet as the bow began to plunge. The axe marks proved the desperate attempt, but they failed to cut the line. Instead, the sheer weight of the Minnedosa plummeting toward the lake bed did what the axe couldn't. It violently ripped the entire weakened wooden post straight out of the ship's deck, separating the sinking schooner from the steamship above.
I want to focus on the psychology of the person swinging that axe. You are actively severing your only physical ties to the living world. You are cutting the umbilical cord.
Yeah.
You know that once that line is cut, nobody is coming to save you. You are accepting the abyss to save the ships around you.
It is an act of ultimate isolation. The moment that post ripped free, the Minnedosa and her 9 passengers and crew were entirely alone in the blackness, plummeting toward the lake floor.
The saturated grain would have pulled her down incredibly fast.
Very fast.
And on the surface, just silence. The storm keeps roaring, completely indifferent to the fact that it just erased 9 lives and a Canadian architectural marvel in a matter of minutes. The indifference of the environment is the true horror here.
It really is.
The lake doesn't care about your courage or your cargo.
The physics of water and weather possess no malice, but they wield absolute unforgiving power. It is a stark reminder of human vulnerability when we strip away our technological safety nets.
So the sun comes up on October 21st. The storm eventually blows itself out. What happens to the scattered pieces of this convoy?
The aftermath is a slow, agonizing realization of the tragedy.
For the survivors.
Yes. The Melrose, which had been cut adrift by the doomed crew of the Minnedosa, survived the night. Her crew endured hours of terror, completely unpowered, rolling in the massive troughs, assuming they would capsize.
But they made it.
But the ship held together. At 5 a.m., a rescue tug located the drifting barge and towed her safely to Harbor Beach later that afternoon.
The crew stumbles onto land, half frozen, completely traumatized, and carrying the chilling news that their tow cable was deliberately slashed in the dark.
Meanwhile, Captain Milligan on the Westmount continued his search, dragging the splintered, axe-gouged towing post on his deck as a grim totem of what had occurred.
Just a horrific reminder.
Eventually, forced by fuel constraints and the reality of the situation, he had to abandon the search. The Westmount and the rescued Melrose finally arrived in Kingston on October 26, 1905.
A convoy of 3, returning as 2, the massive middle link had been entirely erased.
And there was zero trace of the Minnedosa. No bodies washed ashore, no debris field, nothing.
Because of the weight.
The sheer weight of the cargo, the lack of air pockets in the saturated grain, and the speed of the sinking meant the ship essentially acted like a torpedo going straight to the bottom.
Wow.
For nearly a century, she was a true ghost ship, an unsolved mystery regarding her exact final resting place.
Until 1993, 88 years later. Let's talk about the search and the eventual discovery, because locating a ship in the Great Lakes is not like finding a wreck in a shallow bay.
No, not at all.
Why did it take almost 9 decades to find a 250-foot structure?
It comes down to the sheer vastness of Saginaw Bay and the extreme depth of the water. In 1905, dead reckoning navigation meant the coordinates of where the ship vanished were highly inexact. They were guessing within a search grid of hundreds of square miles. Furthermore, the depth where she actually sank was entirely inaccessible to standard search methods for decades.
But then they brought in sonar.
Yes. The physical wreckage was finally located using advanced side-scan sonar. She was found 16 miles off the coast of Harbor Beach, sitting in the dark at a depth of 210 feet.
210 feet.
210 feet, roughly 64 meters. It is a crushing alien environment. The ambient pressure is massive. No natural sunlight penetrates to that depth. It is perpetual midnight.
I want to delve into the reality of technical diving, because this is not a recreational scuba dive. To physically see the Minnedosa, humans had to push the limits of underwater exploration. What does a 210-foot dive actually entail?
It requires extreme life support technology. At 210 feet, breathing compressed air is lethal.
Really? Lethal?
Yes. The nitrogen becomes highly narcotic, causing severe cognitive impairment, often described as the martini effect, where divers lose their minds and simply forget to breathe or swim to the surface.
That is terrifying.
Furthermore, the oxygen in normal air becomes physically toxic at that pressure, triggering fatal seizures.
So how do they get down there?
Technical divers use specialized mixed gases. They breathe a gas called trimix, where a significant portion of the nitrogen and oxygen is replaced with helium.
Okay.
Helium is an inert gas that doesn't cause narcosis, allowing the diver to remain clear-headed in the abyss. But helium is highly thermally conductive, meaning it sucks the heat out of the diver's body incredibly fast. And the water at 210 feet in Lake Huron hovers just a few degrees above freezing year-round.
So they are diving in dry suits, pumped with insulating argon gas, breathing a carefully calculated chemical mixture, sinking down a descent line into total blackness, sweeping the bottom with high-powered dive lights. And what those technical divers found when their lights finally cut through the darkness and hit the Minnedosa is staggering. You would assume a wooden ship that violently plummeted 210 feet with 4.5 million pounds of cargo would be shattered into a pile of splinters on the lake bed.
But the forensic reality of the deep Great Lakes is incredibly eerie. The cold, fresh water acts as a near-perfect time capsule.
Because there's no salt.
In the ocean, a wooden shipwreck is quickly devoured by teredo worms and corrosive salt. The steel rusts away. In Lake Huron, there are no wood-eating organisms at that depth.
So what did it look like?
The divers found the Minnedosa sitting completely upright on the lake floor.
Just sitting there?
She rests perfectly on her keel. Her hull is largely intact. As the divers swam along her 250-foot length, they could see the sheer scale of the architecture looming out of the silt. It looks as if she is still navigating through the abyss.
But there is one detail from the source material regarding this discovery that is deeply unsettling. We talked earlier about how the owners amputated her 4 magnificent masts in 1903 to save money, turning her into a helpless barge.
Right.
When the divers illuminated the deck of the wreck, they found those massive wooden pillars resting on the ship.
It appears the corporate owners, ever frugal, did not discard the expensive timbers when they cut them down. They likely lashed the massive mast to the deck to transport them, or use them as structural booms.
So they just kept them tied to the deck.
When the ship was dragged down in 1905, her amputated limbs went down with her. They lie across her deck like fallen trees, a physical manifestation of her demotion and vulnerability.
Which naturally brings us to the folklore. You cannot have a story about a massive, beautiful, doomed ship resting perfectly upright in the freezing dark without spawning legends.
Oh, absolutely not.
Long before the physical wreck was discovered by sonar in 1993, the Minnedosa had already become a legendary ghost ship among Great Lakes sailors.
The psychology of maritime folklore is fascinating. Ghost stories are rarely just about trying to scare people.
What are they about?
They are a cultural processing mechanism. When an entire ship and crew vanish without a trace, leaving no bodies to bury and no wreckage to mourn, the human mind struggles with the lack of closure. The trauma of the unknown requires a narrative.
The sailors on Lake Huron passed down stories for generations. They say that on certain nights, particularly in late October when the barometers plunge, the wind starts to scream and the snow begins to blind the surface.
Yeah.
If you look out over the churning waters near Harbor Beach, you will not see a helpless, amputated barge.
The legends claim you will see a massive 250-foot, four-masted schooner. Sailors report seeing her magnificent ghostly mast silhouetted against the dark sky, her canvas full, sailing proudly and independently through the storm in the exact coordinates where she was lost.
It is a beautiful, chilling psychological projection. The sailors are subconsciously restoring the dignity of a vessel that suffered a deeply undignified, helpless end. They give her back the mast that corporate greed stole from her.
Exactly. It's an act of historical empathy disguised as a ghost story. It acknowledges the tragedy while allowing the Minnedosa to forever sail the lakes, as she was originally built to do, rather than as a captive pawn.
As we conclude this deep dive, let's step back and look at the entirety of this historical nightmare. We examine the hubris of constructing the largest wooden schooner in Canadian history, only to realize the physical limits of wood on the brutal Great Lakes.
Right.
We tracked the ruthless economic calculus that stripped her of her sails and chained her to a steamship. We calculated the terrifying physics of 4.5 million pounds of expanding, water-soaked grain tearing a hull apart from the inside.
And we forensically reconstructed those final chaotic moments in the pitch black.
Marked forever by the frantic gouges of an axe in the dark, a desperate attempt to sever the tether to the world of the living.
The Minnedosa represents the collision of early corporate cost-cutting, unforgiving environmental physics, and profound human desperation. It forces us to confront how quickly technological marvels can be humbled by the sheer kinetic force of nature.
I want to leave you with a haunting thought. Shipwreck stories command our attention because they are the ultimate locked room mystery. But in maritime history, the room itself is swallowed by the earth. I want you to imagine standing on the freezing, wind-whipped shores of Lake Huron tonight. Look out over the pitch-black water. Beneath those churning waves beyond the reach of the sun, 210 feet down in the freezing abyss, the Minnedosa still sits.
Perfectly upright.
Perfectly upright. A 250-foot giant resting in the dark. The silence of the deep still keeps the final screams of those 9 people and the phantom echoes of their axe strikes locked away forever. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the abyss. We will see you next time.